Hi, strugglers. Here's a story that will completely transform your life. Let's dive into it now. Part 1. The question. Have you ever felt like your life is stuck in a loop where everything repeats itself and you're not sure how to break free? You wake up, go through the same routine, feel the same emotions, and somehow it feels like you're just going through the motions rather than living. But what if I told you that you have the power to completely transform your life? What if I told you that you could rewrite your story starting today? The truth is, we all have the ability to reshape our futures. The problem is, most of us don't realize it. We often feel trapped in the story we've been telling ourselves for years, but there's something we forget. You are the author of your own life. Let's take a journey together, where we break free from the old narratives and start fresh. A journey where you are in control. Part 2. The moment of realization. It was a cold evening, and Mark sat in the corner of his dimly lit apartment. The room, much like his life, felt small, cramped, and suffocating. He stared at the walls, feeling as though he was trapped in a prison of his own making. His job was draining him, leaving him exhausted, uninspired, and feeling like a cog in a machine that didn't care. His relationships felt strained. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a genuine conversation with a friend, a family member, or even his partner. His health was falling apart, too. His energy levels were non-existent, and every morning he woke up with a sense of dread. It felt like he was moving through life on autopilot, just surviving, not truly living. On this particular evening, Mark sat on his couch, scrolling mindlessly through social media. Each post was a reminder of everyone else's success, their happiness, their perfect lives. The more he scrolled, the more he felt that deep ache inside, the kind of ache that told him something was missing. Something was broken, but he couldn't quite figure out what it was. Then, as if fate had intervened, his thumb stopped scrolling. He paused on a quote shared by a friend. It was simple, yet it hit him like a punch to the chest. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Nelson Mandela. For the first time in a long while, those words resonated with him deeply. It felt as though the universe had whispered directly into his soul. What if this wasn't how his story had to go? What if he didn't have to be stuck in this cycle of mediocrity? What if, just like Mandela said, his true glory lay not in avoiding failure, but in rising again? Mark set his phone down and stood up, walking over to the window. He looked out at the city lights, their soft glow illuminating the darkness. But it wasn't the lights that he saw at that moment. It was his life. He wasn't just a passive spectator, watching his own story unfold from the sidelines. He was the author. He was the hero. He wasn't a victim of his circumstances. He was the one who held the pen. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. The weight he'd been carrying, the frustration, the sense of being stuck, all of it seemed to fade away. In its place was something that felt stronger, more empowering. A realization that he had the power to rewrite his own story. The chain that had kept him bound was no longer an obstacle. It was a key, and in that moment, Mark decided that he was no longer going to live as a prisoner of his past. He would rise. He would change. He would transform. It was a moment of clarity that many search for their entire lives. That moment when everything changes. That moment when the fog clears and you see your own potential staring you in the face. And you know what? That same power is within you. Like Mark, you too have the ability to rewrite your story. No matter where you are, no matter how stuck you might feel, you are the one who holds the pen to your future. It is never too late to be what you might have been. George Eliot. Mark looked at his reflection in the window. He didn't recognize the man who had been so broken just moments ago. He was someone new, a man who had finally realized that his past didn't have to define him. The future was his to create, and the first step in doing so was making a choice. To believe in himself. To believe that he had the power to transform his life. And so do you. Part 3. The decision to rewrite. The next morning, Mark woke up with a fire inside him. The cold and dreary apartment felt different, somehow lighter, as if the very air had shifted. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this kind of urgency, this kind of energy. As he stood up, he looked at himself in the mirror, the reflection no longer appearing defeated, but determined. That day, Mark made a decision. It wasn't the grand, dramatic choice that most people think of when they think about changing their lives. It wasn't an instant transformation. No, it was much more simple, but incredibly powerful. He decided that his past would no longer dictate his future. In the past, Mark had believed that his failures, his mistakes, his missed opportunities defined him. They were the walls that had trapped him. He had lived his life believing that he was somehow unworthy of more, that his circumstances were permanent. But now, after everything he had realized, he knew that none of that had to be true anymore. Was it easy? Absolutely not. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of his mind. The doubt, the nagging feeling that he wasn't capable, that he was too far behind. Those thoughts try to push him back. The road to transformation is rarely smooth, and Mark knew that now more than ever. It was going to be hard. There would be setbacks. There would be days when everything felt like it was falling apart. But here's the truth. It was always going to be worth it. Mark's decision wasn't an answer to all the questions in his life. It was simply a commitment to himself, to his future, to the life he wanted, even if it seemed so far away right now. It was the first step to rewriting his story, and as he realized in that moment, the first step is always the hardest but also the most important. And that's where the real power lies. Every day is an opportunity. Every thought is a seed. The story you write today will be the one you live tomorrow. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. In fact, Mark didn't have all the answers. He didn't know exactly what the future would hold or what steps he needed to take. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to start. It's easy to become overwhelmed, to feel like we need to have everything mapped out before we take action. But the truth is, you don't need the full blueprint to begin. You just need that one step, that one moment where you decide to trust that the universe will guide you as you go. Mark's first step wasn't monumental. It wasn't an overnight success. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. It was a promise to himself that he would not wait for permission to be happy, to be successful, or to be fulfilled. He didn't need anyone's validation. He didn't need to wait for the perfect opportunity. He had the power to create the future he desired, and he was ready to step into it. Here's the thing. The universe isn't going to hand you everything on a silver platter, but it will give you signs, synchronicities, and opportunities if you're willing to take that first step. So Mark decided to trust in the process. He wrote down his goals, not in detail, but in broad strokes. He didn't need to know the how just yet. He needed to know the why, and that was more than enough to keep him moving forward. With that, Mark took his first step. It was small. It was imperfect, but it was powerful. It was the beginning of his transformation. And that's where you are right now, standing at the edge of your own transformation. The decision is in your hands. You don't need to know every step you're going to take. What you need is to decide that you are worthy of a better life. The story you've been telling yourself until now doesn't have to be your final one. Take the first step, however small it may be. Whether it's starting that new project, mending a broken relationship, or simply believing in yourself again. The key is this: you're the one who gets to decide how the story unfolds. And remember, the universe will meet you halfway. The path may not always be clear, but each step you take will lead you closer to where you're meant to be. Part 4. The Struggle. As Mark began to rewrite his story, things weren't as easy as he hoped. The fresh momentum he felt on that day of realization soon collided with the harsh reality of life. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's not a smooth ride, but rather a winding road filled with bumps, potholes, and detours. As much as he wanted to believe that his new path would be different, he soon discovered that old habits, doubts, and patterns of thinking had an uncanny ability to creep back into his life. There were days when Mark felt completely drained. The spark he had felt in the beginning, fueled by hope and newfound determination, seemed to fade with each passing challenge. It was easy to get discouraged. He would make progress, only to fall back into his old ways. The self-doubt that had once defined him began to resurface, reminding him of all the reasons he wasn't good enough. He'd think, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But here's the secret, Mark.